r/explainlikeimfive. Dadmoment says, explain like I'm 5, is deflation in an economy always bad? I read that deflation leads to prices dropping, rents and costs stay the same, and many businesses go bankrupt. Is there a way to control the descent, so to speak, and maintain a healthy economy? Thank you. Canadian. Chatterwa says, inflation is good, high inflation is bad. No inflation is bad. The issue is cost of living, and stuff in general is always going up, but wages is staying the same. Most governments have the ability to steer the inflation to some degree. But really it's masses, people, and natural order that controls inflation. For example, if all the gas stations increases their price, or all the landlords, or all the food retailers. Julie Usering says, for the economy and well-being of the average citizen, yes. But as a marketing plan, to get elected due to convincing an ignorant electorate that the economy was so much better when prices were so low due to shutdowns and higher unemployment, priceless. Profit7 says, the basic idea behind it is that if your money is worth more tomorrow, you won't spend it today. So companies that need to sell things have a harder time selling them, which means they have a harder time keeping up with operating costs, which means they have a harder time keeping people employed. People who invest in businesses see this decline in business in your country, so start investing less. Less cash flow into your country means slower growth for your markets in comparison to other countries. It's just this negative feedback loop of less and less money being spent. A little bit of deflation is probably not bad, but the problem is that deflation is much more of a runaway train than inflation. With deflation, once people catch on that it's happening, it's very hard to convince them to start spending money again. r/explainlikeimfive. Carnivoretry Higa says, explain like I'm 5, what happens to old websites? I've been using the Wayback Machine to look for old websites, and I don't understand why some of them are partially accessible and some of them are not. Why is that? Why are some parts of old websites, or entire old websites, seemingly inaccessible? Do they literally vanish from the internet, like morning dewdrops, or are they hidden somewhere, only accessible to the tech savvy? Is there a secret way to find old websites, or are they gone forever? And do they go away instantly, or do they decompose gradually like organic matter? I don't understand how the internet works. Virtually Noon says, back in the day most websites were basically static files that were just served by a web server. The Wayback Machine mimics that, modifying the URLs if needed. Nowadays, a lot of websites have an active component with application servers, APIs and other dynamic features. As such, it's going to be much harder to provide any reasonable response from the Wayback Machine in the future. Unsora Canadian says, the ones that disappear either disappeared because the domain registration expired and for one reason or another never got renewed, the hosting service no longer exists, or if it was a self-hosted service, the server no longer exists. Magpie13 says, my partner and I won a Webby Award or something for a website designed for student airlines. I cannot find it anymore. Very sad. Nutcracker says, websites are hosted by servers, computers, and you also need to pay for a domain name so other computers know where to go when you type in an address. If people don't pay for either, the website essentially vanishes. Many people shut down their sites because they don't get much traffic and can't justify keeping it active. They might still have all the website files somewhere, but without a host and address it is essentially gone from public view. r/explainlikeimfive. Hoy says, explain like I'm 5, why did WW2 fighter aircraft have their wings sweep forward, straight leading, swept trailing? I understand why supersonic/transonic planes follow a backward sweep design. Example of said forward sweep Key 43. I kinda understand that sweeping a wing back helps dealing with the added drag from transonic/supersonic effects. I don't understand though what advantage is doing this kind of straight leading edge, swept trailing edge that sweeps forward achieves though. Bubblegum says, how does modern propeller plane from like Cessnas to acrobatic planes wing differ? Except for maybe rounded side edge, modern prop plane do use straight leading edge wings still? Ekman says, this type of design increased maneuverability and low speed stability as well as maintained an overall low stall speed which was crucial at the time. The shape is mainly structural as it provides the best cost vs performance benefits being easy to manufacture and meeting performance criteria for the lowest cost. Swept back wings were not necessary at the time due to the lower speeds aircraft operated in. The trailing edge taper simply provided better structural integrity. Ron Possible says, because it reduces drag by reducing the wingtip vortices. It also biases the lift nearer the wing root, where the wing is stronger, and, for the same wing area, keeps fuel weight closer to the center line. We Screws 44 says, and to completely boggle your aeronautic brain, look up the Kyushu J7W1 Shinden. Airplane research went wild in the war periods, they basically just put a plane in reverse. r/explainlikeimfive. Retai says, explain like I'm 5, what are your sinuses for other than a regular source of misery? Caro says, they filter the crap in the air before said crap makes it to your lungs. That crap would be way worse in your lungs than in the middle of your face. Sinuses also don't stop you from banging, so they will stay. Fiendish Rabbit says, something that hasn't been mentioned is that your sinuses function as resonators for your voice, enhancing volume and depth, similar to how the hollow space in a guitar enhances the sound of the strings. Do Blood says, maxillofacial radiologist here, most of the answers here are close, but not actually correct. The nasal turbinates are actually the structure that warms, adds moisture, and filter the air we breathe. The passageways from the sinuses into the nasal cavity are pretty small and don't allow sufficient airflow to actually do much. The prevailing hypothesis is that the sinuses are present to lower the overall weight of your skull. They're effectively large hollow, well sometimes filled with mucus, cavities which makes it so you don't have to work as hard to keep your head raised. Your head is already really heavy, on average about 11 pounds depending on the person. While I don't remember the exact number, if you didn't have sinuses and that part of your skull was instead filled. r/explainlikeimfive. Tokaprint says, explain like I'm 5. How does math predict things? Like the existence of black holes, or explain things in the universe? Arcadia says, someone takes a train from their city to you, they confirm that they took the train. It's 100 kilometers away, and the train goes 100 km/h. After an hour and a half he is still not there. You don't think about it that way, but you know something happened. Cause of math. This is a very simple version of math predicting things in everyday life. But also the way we found Neptune was through map predictions. Uranus orbit was weird, we didn't know why. But then someone did some math and came to the conclusion that the orbit would make sense if there was another planet of a specific size in a specific position. So we pointed the telescope in that direction and there it was. Bewildering says, we see things we don't know how to explain yet. We come up with some different explanations, and we use mathematical formulas with these explanations, so that we can measure things in the real world, plug those measurements into the formulas, and see what we get, and whether that matches up with reality. If the formula matches reality really well, then you can also try plugging in numbers that you haven't measured, and see what comes out. Like, what if we make this distance number really small, or this mass number really big? That gives a weird result, like an area of space where nothing, but even light, could escape. That's freaky, but could that be a real thing, or is a formula bad? It's time to put it to the test. Make up an experiment where you can recreate your weird numbers and see what happens. Or look for them to happen in nature and measure what you see going on. If the math still works right, then you used your math to make an accurate prediction. If not, then something is wrong with your measurements or the formula, and you need to rethink things. In the case of black holes, that's something people could predict by putting weird numbers into the formulas for relativity. And they were really confident that black holes were really, and that we would find them one day, but it took a long time for astronomers to verify all this and say that yes, we have found them, and the prediction was correct. r/explainlikeimfive. UMV says, explain like I'm 5. Why do things that spin very fast either look like they are moving slowly, frozen, or moving in reverse? Aaron Possum says, your eyes have something kind of like a refresh rate like a television. When a cyclical object has a similar frequency, an optical illusion occurs. Euphorix 126 says, this happens without a camera. I used to notice as a kid looking at car wheel spokes. Basically, your brain has a framerate as well. Queetum02 says, I assume you're referring to things viewed through a camera. It's called the Nyquist theorem. To correctly capture information you need to sample at greater than twice the lowest frequency. Otherwise you get aliasing, and that can look like it's stationary or going backwards. To explain a little further, imagine a spinning top spinning at 3 revolutions per second. If you take 9 pictures a second you'll see it do a third, 2/3 and complete rotation 3 times a second. If you sample at 6 pictures a second you will see it do a half turn and full turn 3 times a second. But you won't know if it's going clockwise or anti. If you sample at 3 times a second it will look stationary because you only ever see it complete full rotations. Same with if you sample at 1 time a second. Variations on this can make it look like it's going backwards too. Old cameras have a shutter speed, modern ones capture a number of frames, pictures, a second. It's the same thing. Even the monitor you're using to display can matter, as a monitor has a maximum refresh rate too. A similar effect can happen with viewing just your naked eye. I'm a little unsure of the exact medical mechanics, but assume it's essentially just down to sampling frequency. I do know that light flickering at specific frequencies can play a part in. Jagged Metalist says, it's an illusion from the camera. Let's say your video is 30 frames per second. If the object also spins at around 30 times per second, then every time the camera captures a frame the spinning thing will be back at the same rotation and look like it's not spinning. Symmetric objects are even easier. If a wheel has 5 spokes then it could turn just 1/5 the way every frame and look like odd it's not spinning. This is called the wagon wheel effect. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.